Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are cracking open a book that has been on the bestseller lists for what feels like forever, Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. So let's break down its super direct and, yes, sometimes controversial take on living a better life. From the minute we're old enough to watch TV, society is just shouting at us. The secret to happiness is more. You need a better job, a bigger car, a more amazing vacation. It's always more, more, more. Well, this book just grabs that whole idea, flips it completely on its head, and basically argues that this constant, desperate chase for all things positive is ironically a really negative experience.
Okay, so let's really dive into this core concept. Manson actually borrows it from the philosopher Alan Watts, and he calls it the backwards law. And trust me, it is central to everything else in this book.
I know, that quote can kind of twist your brain into a pretzel at first, but the logic behind it is actually pretty simple. When you're desperately craving something, all you're really doing is reminding yourself over and over again of the painful fact that you don't have it. So the harder you chase that feeling of happiness, the faster it seems to run away from you. And this constant pursuit, it leads us right into a really nasty psychological trap.
And Manson gives this trap a name that, well, you're probably not going to forget. He calls it the feedback loop from hell. Let's break down exactly how this thing works. Okay, so it all starts with a totally normal, human, negative feeling. Let's say, for example, you're feeling anxious about a tough conversation you know you need to have. Perfectly normal, right? But then, instead of just accepting that anxiety for what it is, you start judging yourself for it. You think, ugh, why am I so anxious? I shouldn't be feeling this way. What is wrong with me? And just like that, boom, you've kicked off the cycle. Now you're not just anxious about the conversation, you're anxious about being anxious. You've just spiraled into this loop of beating yourself up. And this is so common today. I mean, our culture, with all its perfectly curated social media highlight reels, it makes us feel like it's just not okay to have a bad day. And that belief, that is the exact fuel for this miserable cycle. All right, so if chasing positivity is actually the problem, then what in the world is the solution? Well, it means we have to do a complete 180 on how we even think about happiness itself. See, Manson's big point here is that a happy life isn't a life with zero problems, because let's be real, that's impossible. A truly happy life is one where you are actively solving problems that you actually find meaningful and maybe even enjoyable to solve. The big takeaway here is that happiness isn't some finish line you cross. It's not something you finally achieve. It's an action. It's this constant, ongoing process, because problems never ever stop. They just get traded in for new, hopefully better ones. And that brings us to the real method, the how-to part. The secret isn't about trying to avoid pain altogether. It's about consciously choosing which struggles you're willing to put up with because they serve something you truly value. The book has this absolutely perfect example to show what this looks like in the real world. Let's take a look at two rock stars who went through almost the exact same career-crushing event. So you have Dave Mustaine. He gets kicked out of Metallica, and what does he do? He goes and forms another legendary band, Megadeth. But he measured his entire life by one single metric he could never control, being bigger and more successful than Metallica. And by that standard, he always felt like a failure. Then you have Pete Best. He got kicked out of the Beatles right before they became, well, the Beatles. After years of struggling, he eventually changed what he valued. He started prioritizing his wife and kids over fame. And guess what? He found his happiness there. It's a pretty wild comparison, isn't it? The same exact professional tragedy, but two totally different life stories. So what's the one thing that made all the difference? And here it is. This is the variable that explains everything. Your happiness, your sense of success, it all depends on the values you choose and the yardstick you use to measure your life against them. Okay, so that naturally leads to the big question for all of us, right? How do you even figure out what your values actually are? And maybe more importantly, whether they're helping you or secretly sabotaging you. Well, Manson gives us this framework he calls the self-awareness onion. You basically peel back the layers. So you start by identifying an emotion. Then you ask yourself, why do I feel this way? You keep asking why until you hit the core, which reveals the value or the metric that's causing that feeling in the first place. And once you do that, you can start to see if your values are good ones, meaning they're based in reality and they're things you can actually control, or if they're what Manson calls shitty values, which are superficial and depend entirely on things outside of your control, like being liked by everybody. And that's where it all comes together. See, the subtle art here isn't about being indifferent to everything, not at all. It's about being incredibly selective and intentional about what you choose to care about, saving your energy for the things that truly matter to you.
And that's really the final, powerful idea this book leaves you with. The path to a good life isn't defined by the joys you chase after. It's defined by the struggles you're willing to embrace. Because at the end of the day, the quality of your life is really just the quality of the problems you are willing to solve.